Hello everyone, Peppermint here. Today I am going to share with you 14 mistakes that I have made when I was a newbie canner. But before we get started, how about hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel? I really could use your support and I would really love to have you as being a part of my channel. So thank you in advance and let's get on with it. The first mistake that I made was not reading the entire manual that went to my pressure canner before trying to pressure can. And a lot of these other mistakes that I made, you can go right back to this very first one and say, if I had read. Okay, the second mistake that I made is when I started to fill the pressure canner up with water, I filled it all the way up with water. I filled it up way past the jars, like maybe an inch or two past the jars, and then I put my lid on it and I started the pressure can. It took forever for that water to heat up. But if I had went back to reading my manual, the mistake number one that I made, that I probably would not have made that mistake, because Presto only requires you to use 3 quarts of water to pressure can. Mistake number 3, I couldn't get the lid on the pressure canner because I just didn't know that you match up the V's on both the lid and the pot part of the pressure canner, and then once you match those up, you put the lid on and it should go on, and then you turn the lid clockwise to make it stay. And so, that's another one. If I'd have went back to mistake number 1, then I would have never made this mistake. But these are the types of mistakes that new people make, and I'm no different than anyone else for the most part. Okay, mistake number 4. I bought cracked and dented lids. Thank goodness I did not use the cracked jars, but I did use some of the dented lids. Well, I could say that, if I had bought all new jars, that I wouldn't have had that problem. But the problems that I had were actually from the new jars. I picked up a whole case of jars, brand new, reputable company, and I used them, and then I looked on one of the lids and it did not seal, but whenever I looked on the lid, there was a dent on the side of the lid. And so, there was no wonder it didn't seal. So, my mistake was not checking, and my mistake was before even buying, I didn't check. I just picked it up and put it on my cart and went and paid for it and took it home. So, but there was this other different company. I got it home. I didn't think that there would be anything wrong with it. They looked fine. Okay. I opened up the package, looked at the bottom of one of the jars, and there was a place on there. If I had rubbed my finger across there, then it would have cut my finger, because the glass was not right. And so I'm glad I did not use that jar. So at least the most important things I did catch. Whenever I was buying the used jars, I was pretty good at rubbing my finger. Now, I bought one bad batch, because when you have a tendency to buy jars from someone and they say, okay, $20 and you get all these, I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty good. So I get them, and like a quarter of them are broken. They have a chipped rim or something. So I messed up there. But from now on, it didn't take very long for me to realize and to learn that whenever you buy a used jar, first thing you do is you pick it up and you rub your finger across the top of the rim, and you're feeling for any kind of imperfection. And sometimes I will take my fingernail and rub across it as well, because your fingernail will go right down in one of those crevices, if there's a crack on the lid, on the rim. So if there's a crack on the rim of the jar, then nothing's going to seal. It would be very surprising to me if it would seal. So being cautious about the jars that I buy is something that I do now. I do it every single time. It doesn't matter if they're new or if they're not new. Okay, mistake number 5. I did not make enough sauce for the brown sugar glazed carrots. I just misjudged. I made the recipe up and assumed that it would be just exactly what I needed, but no, you have to do a little bit of math here and there. Okay, mistake number 6, forgetting to wipe the rim of the jar. Now this is not that serious, but into this product and you're wanting to use this product, if it doesn't seal, it's like your time is being wasted. And whenever you do not wipe the rim of your jar, you're chancing that maybe a grain of salt or something might be on the top of the lid, or the lid might be too greasy, or whatever. Something could be on there that could prevent that jar from sealing. And you don't want that. You don't want to spend your time and waste it like that. You want to spend your time wisely and get some food on the shelves. Mistake number 7, not venting the steam for 10 minutes. Well, if you go back to mistake number 1, where I didn't read the manual, I didn't know you was supposed to vent for 10 minutes. I did watch some videos, but I didn't catch on to everything. So I didn't do it. But I didn't die from the food, so everything is okay. Sometimes you just have to forgive yourself for doing things like that, because when you're new, then you do make mistakes. You do want to vent and let that steam out. That is part of the processing time for your product. And also, when it's venting, it's getting rid of a lot of oxygen that is in your product. And you don't want oxygen in there, because oxygen is food's worst enemy. Mistake number 8, not using pot holders when removing the lid. Well, I took the lid off and I was careful not to let any steam go into my face. So I was good that way. But the water that drips off of the lid burned my hands. And then at a different time that I didn't use pot holders, I was also not wearing shoes. And the water dripped down onto my feet, and that was pretty hot. So wear pot holders and be really careful of your feet. Wear shoes, or be very careful, because that water is very hot. Mistake number 9, not removing the weight at the correct time. Well, there for a while, I was doing the processing time, and then I moved the canner off the heat, and then after the lock fell, I would, and everything was at 0, I would not take the weight off. I would leave the weight on, and I would time it 10 minutes, and then I would take the weight off, and then I would time it another 10 minutes. So that was costing me like 10 minutes of my time, just because I was taking the weight off at the wrong time. I could have been getting my stuff out so much quicker. Mistake number 10, not washing the jars the next day. Okay, so what I did was I just kind of wiped it down with a rag and put it on the shelf. But you know what happens if you do not clean those jars up really well? You can cause bugs and other pests to come into your area where you have your food. And so you should always wash your jars the next day before you put them on your shelf. And that's what I do now. I run some water inside the canner because I usually haven't washed the canner until the next day. And so I've washed everything else, but the canner is something that I'm a little bit slow on. And the canner, I fill it up full of water, not full of water, but I fill up some water into that canner, and I wash the canner, and while the water is still in there, I put my jars in there that have sealed, one by one, take the lids off, and I'm checking them as I do that, and I'm washing them, just like washing dishes, and then I put them in the dishwasher to drain, just to dry off. And that seems to be my little routine. So that's what I'm happiest with now. And that's one thing about being a new canner, is establishing routines, trying to find out what's going to work for you. And that's what I was doing. I was trying to find out what was going to work for me, what was going to make me remember certain things, and what was going to be the best way of doing them. Mistake number 11, sterilizing jars when you don't have to. Okay, so let's talk about this one. I was sterilizing the jars. I was putting them in the oven and making sure that they were in there at 180 degrees for 10 minutes. Well, they were pretty hot and everything. Well, the USDA has approved that you do not have to sterilize your jars anymore, as long as you are processing for at least 10 minutes. You do not have to sterilize your jars, and that's for water bath canning and also for pressure canning. I've been using my sink to warm up my jars so that they can be hot, and I just use the hottest that my spigot will give me. And I've been putting my lids in there and also my rings all in there at the same time, and it's been working out really well. Mistake number 12, using vintage lids. Okay, I thought I had a good thing going with vintage lids, but I didn't. The lids at first, they were like sealing really well. I mean extremely well. They would pop, and the pop would be so much louder than the other jars. But what I saw is one brand, they started having this sticky texture to it, to the rubber. And then the other brand that I was using, the rubber, I took a dowel and stuck it down in the rubber, and it just come up like clay. And so I'm not sure if that's something that I just don't know anything about. It's probably that they are just dry rotted. So Yum. I was eating that food from those lids. But I'm okay. So from now on, I'm not going to use any lids that are extremely old. Those lids were probably back from the 70s. Mistake number 13. Not allowing a steady stream of steam escape through the canner for 10 minutes before processing time. As soon as it processed, I was on my way. You need to do this. This is very important. That extra 10 minutes is part of the processing time. And also it is expelling some oxygen that is in the canner you want to get rid of. Oxygen is food's worst enemy, and you do not want any oxygen in there that you don't have to have in there. Mistake number 14. I had a bad habit of purchasing too much food, so I would end up filling up my 23 quart, and then I would get out my 16 quart because I had purchased way too much food, and I would need to fill up another canner. It takes a little bit of math and also a little bit of doing, because sometimes food swells, like pinto beans. You'll get, twice as much, if not more, food out of it than when it was dry. And so you just have to, some of this stuff just comes with experience, just doing it and learning and finding out. There were my 14 mistakes that I'm going to share with you today. I'm sure there were others, but I don't remember what they are. But anyway, I hope everyone has a nice day. And if you enjoyed my video, then how about hitting the like button and sharing? So everyone have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Yeehaw!